Hey, welcome back to the channel. Are you a fan of the handhelds and, once again, not a fan of the screens? But more importantly, do you wish there was a good way to play something like your Game Boy Advance on your TV? Sure, most of us have thought of that over the years. And of course, Nintendo did bring out the Game Boy player on the GameCube. But nowadays, if you want one, you're going to spend a couple $100 just for the boot disc. Some of the collectors have gotten crazy with this. Not to mention, you're going to have a GameCube and the player. So you're going to spend quite a bit of money just for that option, if you don't already have it. But Handheld Legend recently released a version 3 IPS kit that has video out, and we don't even have to chop up the shell. It manages to go out the game port on the top. Today, we're looking at what it takes to install one. So, if you stick around, we'll show you how to get that done. All right, on the bench today, we have another Game Boy Advance that we're going to do an IPS on. But this one's a little bit different than the last one we did. And I'll link that one above. In some ways it is similar, in another way it's going to be different. And the big difference is this particular kit now has an AV out option, which doesn't hack up the case, which actually kind of excites me. The modifications will all come back through the data port, and it's my understanding that it also doesn't mess up the functionality of the data port. So let's just go ahead and get into it. I'm going to move some of this aside. And of course, we have our IPS kit that came from Handheld Legend, which has a discount code if you check the links below. And we will be using the Prestige shell that they supply. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and put a Pikachu shell lens on it. And we're going to reuse our gray buttons because for some reason I thought the light yellow and the light gray might go good together. So we'll put that aside. Now, one thing. Normally in my videos, I do a lot of uncut, a lot of detail, and for the sake of length of this video, because my last GBA IPS screen turned into a two-parter, I'm going to do a little bit of cutting, a little bit of fast forwarding, but trust me, all the details on how to get the AV working will be included, and of course all the details on how to fit the shell are in that last video. So first thing we need to do is get into this guy. It's going to have tri-wings for the main screws and a Phillips under there. The rest of the screws inside are going to be Phillips, so let's get those out. We're going to save all of our buttons to reuse. From here, to get the only part we're really going to need out of this original Game Boy is this main board. If you pop the ribbon, just move the gate up, and it'll come loose. But it's normally easier just to go ahead and do it after you get the screws out. There's a couple more Phillips. All right, we have our main board out. And we can just leave our speaker hanging for now because we're going to reuse it in our new shell. There is one part here labeled EM3 that we need to remove for this to be successful. So I'm going to get the microscope and I'll be right back. All right, as you can see over here, we can clearly see our EM3 and it's right here. I'm assuming this is going to be a filter of some sort, and you know, the kit says we need to remove it. So, a few ways we can do it, but I would say the most simple, especially for an end user is just go ahead and get your soldering iron pretty hot, 400 Celsius or so. You're going to put some fresh solder on both sides. And you're just going to wipe it away. Once the heat transfers, these little parts, you know, they come off the board without even trying. Which is also why you have to be careful and have a steady hand when you solder surface mounts. We can wipe away a little bit of that excess. Just clean the tip and pull it off. And just for cleanliness sake, go ahead and hit it with a little IPA. Okay, for now we can set our board aside and we're going to start looking at our shell. And since our mat's dirty, let's just get a clean piece of paper towel to set everything on. And the contents of our kit. This kit is more or less the same as the V3 unbranded kit that we looked at before and that Handheld Legend sells. It's also very similar to the Funny Playing kit that's being sold. They're doing a nicer job of packing these days. They used to just be in a padded sleeve, but now they're putting them in this little plastic shell. And of course, they always say test before installation. Now, unfortunately, this one's been sitting around the shop for about a month, so I don't think I'd be able to do anything about it if there was a problem. We have our insulating tapes, we have our controller boards, we have our mounting foam, and of course our IPS screen. And everything looks good there. Now, if we were using the original screen, there would be a plastic strip here that would be removed and kind of a bottom bit here that would be removed. Unfortunately, on the website right now, there's conflicting installation diagrams. One is showing to remove it, one is showing to leave it. So unless if this screen has physically changed, which I don't think it has, what we're going to wind up doing is mounting it up into this top corner. All right, so we don't have to do any prepping with this shell. And of course, we will need to look at our board to see if we have a 32 or I believe it's a 41 pin. And as we can see here, this one's actually marked 32. So we're going to use this ribbon. And of course, the kit comes with both ribbons, you know, as needed. So it's going to work this way. This is going to go to the board. This end is going to go to our game. So I'm actually going to mark that with a Sharpie, just so I know which end is which. Okay, let's set these aside for a second. And we're going to look at our board. So here's our controller board. Got the wires wrapped around themselves, who knows why, but just gently pull them apart. Here's our FPC connector. All right, so what we're going to want to do is just go ahead and get some of this insulating film on the screen, like as in the last one. We're going to position this right where our FPC connector is. Like that. And I'm just going to use a little piece of Kapton tape to hold her in place. Like that. And we'll give it a test fit. Okay, so it should fit up in this top corner if you're using this Prestige shell. And this little There's two sticks. One would go underneath for the OE, and this thin one should more or less fit into this corner, and it will. And I don't use this whole piece because the screen doesn't always fit perfectly flush. So I just take a small piece to help stabilize our screen. So everything's looking good there. We can get our, well, that's our screen. We can get our backing foam and get it positioned in place. The thick side's going to go to this edge and the whole way to the top. You can just kind of tap it in place. I probably shouldn't have pulled both films, but I pulled the top one on accident. So it's very close on this edge. Peel our film. Go ahead and set it up in this top right-hand corner. As snug as it will go. And we can put our little piece of acrylic. Like that. And our two touch sensors will now get installed. Peel the back. One will go up into this top cavity. The other will get just stuck in the bottom. Since we have our screen in place, we might as well get our lens in place to keep any dust out. I always pull the front because it just makes it easier, especially on these glass ones. But when you go to peel the back, make sure you get it all up. Don't make the mistake of just peeling that. Or peeling that, because you can see, you can't see. So you got to get that paper up too. It's no fun having to dig one of these off after the install. Make sure there's no dust. Let's go ahead and just set that in place for safety. All right. All right, next thing I want to do is we're going to start soldering up some of our connections. So let's go ahead and get our AV cable in place. And since this is going to be this way, and we will wind up folding everything, we're going to put it in under this bail. Make sure it's nice and square. Use 2 fingers. Push that bail down. Don't force that bail if it doesn't go. And this is going to wrap around just like that. And once it's down in and square, go ahead and push the bail in on this side. Like that. All right. So now we're going to have to do a little bit of soldering here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to just come in and tin up these little pads just to make sure that we've got some nice fresh solder on them. And we can put some flux on them to help with this and to give us a nice clean tin. Just put a dab of solder on the soldering iron and give it a touch. And repeat. Okay, that looks pretty good. Clean off our tip. And we're going to grab a couple of our wires. I'm not a fan of using all the same color, but we're just going to do it since these are what are with the kit. So we're going to go ahead and attach this AV and this is going to go to pin 1 on our connector. And you can see the 1 there. So 1, 2, and on the side 5, 6. So we're going to go ahead and solder it here. Make sure that you didn't melt your insulation. We're going to grab another wire. We're going to go from the ground to the ground on our board. Like that. Don't forget to keep your tip clean. All right, our next connections are going to be from the, let's find it, there we go, our left and our right here on our driver board. And we are going to go to test points 8 and 9. So here's test point 9. And just like before, let's just go ahead and put a dab of solder on it, and I'm just going to come over here to test point 8 and do the same. Have our soldering iron cup temp. And let's find it. Here's test point 8. All right. Here again, we're just going to take a wire. We'll solder it there. And we could probably cut these way back, but let's just see what happens with the length that comes in the kit. That one's to R. Take another wire. Connect to L. And come over to test point 9. And of course, things aren't flowing. Clean the tip. Fresh solder. Try it again. There we go. Nice, good connection. All right, our final piece of wire in this kit is going to go to our select button. So solder our select there to the board. We're going to go to test point 2, which is over by our start and select buttons. There it is. All right. It's, for the people watching, it's right here on our board. And here again, a little bit of flux. Clean our tip. A little solder on the tip. Steady hand. And we got a nice little blob of solder. And of course, now I'm trying to do this backwards. So who knows what's going to happen. Let's see if we push that up just a little bit more. There we go. That's better. All right, so that's all of our connections that we need to make. So let me verify to see if we should have any more insulation on this. I'm thinking we may, and I'll be right back. All right, it didn't say anything about it. Some of the other kits actually come with a little bit of foam, kind of like, you know, on the back of our OE screen. But there was this one more, you know, clear vinyl sticker or clear, I'm not actually sure what these are, but you know, they're not real soft, so they're not pliable. But we're going to go ahead and put it on the back of this one, just to make sure nothing touches our main board. Keep it out of our buttons and just, I guess, loosely stick it. It's not real super adhesive on there. So, all right, so now we can just go ahead and take the buttons out of our old shell and start to put them in our new shell. And I'm sure you don't need to see that process, and I'll be right back. Okay, we got our shell all put back together. While I was doing this one, I've used a bunch of these Prestige shells from Handheld Legends, and they're absolutely great. And I've never, you know, had any issues. I guess the only one issue I'd had is with the Game Gear shell. But it wasn't so much an issue with the shell, it was an issue with the screen modification we did, and we had to remove a top screw lug. So I've used a bunch of these in my personal Game Boy Advances and for customers. And one thing I noticed is as I was putting the shell together, well, I guess I should take a step back. When you're putting a system back together, never force anything, especially when it's delicate and something like that IPS screen could be damaged. You know, as you're putting it back together, if you're seeing it bulge open or something and a little wiggle doesn't pop it into place, you know, go ahead and stop, open it up and investigate. And on this one, it was hanging open right in this region. And I thought, sorry, on this side. And I thought maybe it was because the wires we soldered in behind our game port. And I looked and they had plenty of clearance. But what I noticed was, and this is our original shell. The first thing is the screws that they're using are all kind of these generic Phillips. And they're not huge, but they have a kind of a big head on them. And you can see here the OEs have these little flat screws. Also in this one, there was screws in all 4 positions. And the factory, you know, these are missing. So I went ahead and take out the top and I tried to refit it and it didn't quite fit right. And, you know, it just felt like when I was pushing here, it just felt like it was rocking on something like in this area. And at first I thought maybe it was this plastic and I was going to trim it. But then what I wound up doing is taking this other bottom screw out. And at that point, the shell went right together. I don't know if it's a revision on the motherboard or what, but keep that in mind. Now, you can take these screws out because the case screws come through here and will hold the shield, you know, and this is where our cartridge goes in. still hold this in place, so it's not that big of a deal. So I wound up taking, you know, these 3 screws out, just leaving one end to hold everything in place. And then the shell went back together just fine. Also, Handheld Legend uses, on these Prestige shells, they do use their own hardware. Make sure you use your supplied hardware and not your factory hardware. The factory screws are longer than the supplied screws. And I've seen a bunch of these come into my shop and, you know, they just ask for some basics, you know, maybe it's a screen upgrade or whatever, and they'd already put a new shell on. And you'll see these little white points sticking out, and it doesn't look nice. It doesn't keep it from working, doesn't break anything, but, you know, it stresses the plastic. So, as you can see, oh, well, I guess I did miss something, but as you can see, it turned out really nice. Also, when you go to fold your board back over, what I noticed is there's plenty of room up here for the wires to come across as you fold it. But the wires that went to test points 8 and 9 will come across some plastic supports here and here. What I wound up doing is just kind of putting the board in place, seeing where they were going to go. And I just used a hobby knife, and I just made a little relief on the inside plastic for the wires. You don't want to pinch the wires. You don't want to short anything out. So I guess the final thing is to put a sticker on. Hey, there it is. So let's go ahead and do that. And these Retro 6 Prestige shells are just absolutely fantastic. So I grabbed Pokemon Sapphire, which I just recently finished again. We'll get some batteries in here and see what happens. Oh, look at that. You really have to love these IPS screens. They just are so bright and so nice. Of course, let's go ahead and turn the volume down just a touch. And we had some touch buttons put in. There it is. So this one's going to control our brightness, as you can see. And the one that is up here, it's controlling color modes. Honestly, on a Game Boy Advance, I don't see much need for that. But I guess if you're playing original Game Boy games, you may want to put it in a certain color palette. So anyway, we have our 2 touch screens. The last bit of this is our new video out. So, you know, for all the guys that use a Game Boy player on a GameCube and know that the GameCube players, the startup discs alone are hitting the $200 mark. This is actually probably a less expensive way to do it. If you already have a Game Boy Advance, this, I believe right now, these screen kits are about $70, which is $15 more than the standard kit. But, you know, I'm real interested to see what this looks like. So let's go ahead and move this over to composite. And of course, I'm bumping our color. There it is. Should probably turn this off just for safety reasons. There we go. This is going to go in our headphone jack for audio. Which, mind you, this is an old board, so if we don't get good audio or something scratchy, you'll have to forgive me. All right, we have it in composite, and I actually had to pull up the instructions to see how to do it. So after installation, you will connect it to the TV, press and hold select, right and left. So our bottom one, right and left, for 5 seconds to activate TV mode. So let's see what happens. There we go. Old Game Boy, probably have to service that switch. So, or the batteries may be weak. So, all right, so let's try this out. We're going to push select, right, and left for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there it is. Look at that. Now you have an inexpensive way of playing your Game Boy Advance games. I'll have to play with the volume. I think I have it down on the TV. There we go. You can see my game. So there you have it. This is the Handheld Legend. It's the unbranded with the TV out. And honestly, that looks really pretty good for being basically a 16-bit machine. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and make them down below. If you want a discount from Handheld Legend, there is a link in the description, and it does help support the channel. And please, please, please hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. And I'll catch you on that next video. Thanks.